Hi everyone. I was just playing this game on Lichess. I have the black pieces in this position. I'm in check. I'm very low on time. It's a blitz game. And I decided to give up the pawn by moving my king away and letting white capture it. I was taking my time here, believing that I would be awarded a draw if my time ran out. But I was wrong. My time ran out in this position, and my opponent with the white pieces was granted the win. Now, I believe this rule is correct. It is consistent with the FIDE rules of chess. So what is the rule about insufficient mating material? Well, in FIDE rules, the rules state if there's no possible sequence of moves that could lead to a checkmate, then the game is declared a draw automatically. Neither player has to claim it. It's just a dead position. Well, in this position, neither player can force a checkmate, but with cooperation, a checkmate is possible. I'll show you a position in a minute where you can checkmate with one minor piece against another. So Lichess is following the FIDE laws of chess and correctly granting white a win because black's time ran out. Okay, but I believe the rule has changed in the last several years. The rule used to be different. On Lichess, the rule used to be in this position it was declared a draw because even though black's time has run out, white's material was considered insufficient because the king and the knight are not enough to force checkmate. And I think the way the rule was implemented was that the rule was ignoring any material that black had in this position that could help cooperate in a checkmate. So the rule was pretending that white has a king and a knight and black has simply the king. And if that were the case, then yes, that would be a dead draw. There's no possible way to deliver checkmate. The reason I believe this used to be the rule, and I don't know when the change took place, is because I once played a position like this. I had the white pieces, and I was about to checkmate black. It looks just like a textbook endgame, and I was happy to know how to do it. But my time ran out, and I was only a couple moves away. And in this case, the moves would be knight to f1. The black king cannot move. The pawn has to push. And then knight to g3 is checkmate. And I was almost there, but my time ran out, and the game was declared a draw. Okay? And the reason it was declared a draw is because the rule was looking at my material, king and knight, and saying that's not enough to mate if black doesn't have any extra material. And so the rule was assuming black doesn't have any extra material. But they've changed that rule and updated it so it's more consistent with what FIDE says. And I like that. I like the way Lichess does that. However, I noticed that chess.com, where I also play, has a different rule. They have the old Lichess rule still. They haven't updated to the FIDE rule. You can check me on that. If I'm wrong about that, you can leave a comment. But I do remember a recent game where the rule seemed to be like the old FIDE rule, or the old Lichess rule rather, where this would have been declared a draw. And I think it would be on chess.com. I looked it up, and this is what chess.com has on their website. And I think this little short article on insufficient mating material is actually contradictory. It says, so you're playing a game of chess and you're getting near the end. There are only a few pieces left and one more is captured. But then the game ends in a draw and you get the message insufficient mating material. What does this mean? It says the insufficient mating material rule says that the game is immediately declared a draw if there is no way to end the game in a checkmate. That sounds like the FIDE rule to me. No way to end it in a checkmate means no possible sequence of moves that ends in a checkmate. So if you stop reading there, it sounds like, yes, chess.com is in agreement with Lichess and FIDE. But read further. It says the most common way that this happens is when the game is down to just 2 kings. There is no possible way to get checkmate. Again, the word possible, even if your opponent blunders. So the game is declared a draw. Okay, agreed. But then it says there are other combinations that will cause a draw that are not as obvious. If both sides have any one of the following, and there are no pawns on the board: a lone king, a king and bishop, a king and knight. It says in the above scenarios, the game will end in a draw because it is not possible to force mate. So now they're changing the language. Instead of a possible mate, they're talking about a forced mate. So this article is contradicting itself. There's no possible way to force mate against a lone king with that material. You have a king and a bishop. Your opponent has a king and bishop. It's a draw. A king and bishop versus a king and a knight, draw, and so on. That's not true. A king and bishop and a king and knight, there is a possible way to get a mate, not force mate, but there's possible sequence of moves that leads to mate. So what part of this article are we to believe? It says it's not possible to force mate here, and above it says that there was no sequence of moves. It said that there is no way to end the game in checkmate. Well, there is a way to end the game in checkmate with a knight versus a bishop. In fact, here is such a position. It's white to move and mate. There we go. Checkmate is possible. Okay. However, if you don't deliver that mate in time, chess.com's rules say this would be a draw, which is in contradiction to FIDE laws. It's also in contradiction to Lichess rules. Not that Lichess and chess.com have to have the same rules. Digging a little deeper, I think there's a little bit more to the story, which is in FIDE rules, there's some extra rules for when you're in time pressure. There's some kind of rule that says if you're under 2 minutes on the clock and you don't think your opponent can possibly force a checkmate, you don't think that they can play for a checkmate, they can only play to win on time, then you can actually stop the clock, call an arbiter over, and have the arbiter make that decision. For example, in this kind of a position, before the black king gets into the corner, if you have a king and knight and a king and bishop just in the middle of the board somewhere, and you're very low on time and your opponent has more time than you and they're trying to flag you, if you're under 2 minutes, FIDE says you can stop your clock, call the arbiter, and point out that this should be a draw. And if the arbiter agrees, then a draw will be declared. Of course, you can't implement that on a chess.com or Lichess platform. You can't have an arbiter, you can't stop the clocks, and so forth. So they have simpler rules. And the rule is just if a checkmating sequence is not at all possible on Lichess, then it is a draw. Okay, on chess.com, it does not seem to be that way. On chess.com, it says if you can't force checkmate, it should be a draw. So I just wanted to point out, so you know, if you play on those two websites, that the rules are different. If I'm wrong about any of this, please leave a comment. Thanks for listening.